Okay, thank you so much for facilitating this. So my name is Quentin, and I work as a client consultant at EcoCounter. And today I'll present about the study that we've conducted for the Canadian Association of Physicists in the Environment in the city of Vancouver. So using count data. My agenda today, so I'll tell you a little bit about what we do at EcoCounter. I'll present some key takeaways of the study we've done for CAPE, the methodology, the cycling trends that we've observed, the safety indicators that we've developed, and if I have some time, the limitations of our work. So for those of you who don't know who we are at EcoCounter, we are a company, researching, developing, manufacturing, and distributing pedestrian and bicycle counters. They're battery powered. They, count pedestrians with fairly low tech technology like infrareds. And as for cyclists, we're using, as you can see here, some tubes, but also some inductive loops in the ground. We work with organizations, private, public, urban, nature, like natural areas, like very different contexts, let's say, and environments. And we, clients own their data that they collect with our products, and we also help them along the way in, purchasing the right products and accompanying them in the data process. So we have also a team of analysts, and so what I'm presenting today is the work that they've performed for one of our clients, with data from one of our clients who is the city of Vancouver, who has had counters for about 10 years now, a bit more than 10 years with us. I'll start right away with the key takeaways of this study, which was looking at the progress of cycling in the city of Vancouver and how safe cycling has become in the city of Vancouver. So there's definitely been a significant increase in cycling in Vancouver over the last 10 years. Through our counting systems alone in downtown Vancouver, we've observed a 40% increase since 2011. More specifically, and I'll cover it quickly in my presentation, we've seen a higher rate of growth, let's say, in the winter months, which mean that there is some retention of the cyclists, more retention of cyclists biking in the summer, so more year-round cycling. And we've also seen that reported collisions involving vehicles have been reduced by 15% in 2019 and 43% in 2020, which was the pandemic year. So a lot less car traffic downtown, so less collisions, etc. But I will skip the pandemic part for today and focus on the network study we've done to assess safety in Vancouver. Last but not least, so this study, has been done by using a network screening approach. So we've looked at data from collision data from the ICBC, the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, GPS trace data from Smart Halo, as well as our counting data at specific locations throughout the city, more specifically on the all age and abilities network of Vancouver. So the way we've worked, we have about 15 permanently installed bicycle counters throughout Vancouver. So we've, with this data, we can pick up bicycle count every day on a daily basis. So it's continuous data over a period of 10 years. So it allows us, to look at progress over the years, look at seasonal effects. In terms of, but this is at very point locations, right? So what we needed to extrapolate the data to locations where collisions happen, we needed to have GPS or routing data that could connect our counts to the locations where collisions were happening. So the idea was to develop an estimate of the average annual daily, annual daily bicycle traffic throughout the network of Vancouver. So for this, we used both our permanent bike counting stations as well as GPS bike trip data. And as I said, the safety analysis, so we looked at collision data from the ICBC, and the idea was to explore where collisions were happening and when collisions were happening to help the city develop better, or new programs to further increase safety on their network. I'm just saying this because the city was reporting, number of collisions involving cyclists, number of deaths, number of injuries, and those numbers tend to increase as you have more cyclists on the road. So the idea was to have a more complete picture of how safe is it actually to bike in Vancouver, knowing that there's been improvements in the infrastructure. This is on the left, you can see this is the existing and planned facilities network of Vancouver. Highlighted in blue is the all ageability network. So it's really focused on downtown and some arterial or let's say recreational routes along the river, but also an arterial route that goes downtown. And as you can expect, the annual average daily bicycle traffic, at least the estimate that we got with our model, it really shows that cyclists do use those facilities because they exist. So, when we say build it and they will come, we can see that this is true here. So this is just showing network use of the Vancouver bicycle network. That was extrapolated with the bicycle route data. When we look at so those are the publicly available bike counting locations. So when we look at those locations and the count that they give us, those are the counts for the average annual daily bicycle estimates for the year of 2020. So, it ranges from 500 to 4,500 cyclists per day at those intersections or at those locations where the counters are located downtown Vancouver. So this is just to give you an idea of the proportion of cyclists riding on those facilities. And when we look at the progress of cycling over the years through the count data, we've observed, especially in the last, 3 years, 4 years, let's say, a cycling boom, like in a lot of other places that we can also look at with our counters. So it's the order of magnitude, and those are quite representative of cycling in Vancouver because we're looking at bridges. So bridges are interesting to count because you're funneling a lot of cyclists through those points. So it's ideal to track progress through the monitoring of bridges. So as you can see, there's been like a progress of about 33, like a 34% increase on Burwood Bridge and 41% on Hornby Street. But if we don't take into account 2020, which was slightly less cycling on Hornby Street because of less activity downtown, we're looking at a 77% increase in cycling compared to 2010, the beginning of the study. So very impressive growth in the city of Vancouver. We also compared cycling growth, so the distribution of the cycling rate from the beginning of our study period in 2010 with the end of our study period, which is 2018-2020. And interestingly enough, we see that the highest growth is actually on what we call the shoulder months, so late fall and midwinter months. So yeah, growth is not constant throughout the year. It really is on the concentrated, let's say, on the winter months. And we can see this, like with our bike count data of winter versus summer. We're looking here at, when we say winter, it's December, January, February, and summer is June to August. And we see the retention rate. So how many cyclists actually keep cycling. So it was 1 in 5 cyclists, 1 in 5 summer cyclists that used to bike in the, that would keep biking in the winter in 2016. And we're looking at more recent years, we're almost at 1 in 3 cyclists that are biking in the winter as well, that keep biking in winter. We were interested in looking at whether this could be explained with, a change in weather, maybe. So although there has been some temperature increases over this period, so we're talking about 3 degrees on the last the last winter, sorry, that was, or the winter of 2020, 2021, that was 3 degrees warmer, sorry, than the 5 winters ago. However, there's been more precipitation. And so this is data that we also look at to assess the validity of the count or to explain variations in our count. So in this case, the weather, temperature and precipitation did not explain, the increase in the winter retention. So it really is due, the assumption here, or the hypothesis here, is that it is due to improvements in the bicycle network, and maybe also operational, like the operations or the cleaning or the maintenance of this network in the winter months. We have to say, that the winter in Vancouver is not the harshest as here in Montreal, but it still is, could be raining more. So if we look at safety, let's move on over to this because this is what we're interested in here. So all this was to explain, how many, how cycling evolved in the city. Now we're looking at what is the effect of this increase of cycling on the exposure of cyclists to collisions. So when we're looking at the data and the total frequency of reported bicycle car crashes in Vancouver over the last 5 years, this is the frequency of collisions per month that we observe. So we would be tempted to say that there is a higher risk, in the summer months, and this is where we need to be more careful to cyclists because there's just more cyclists riding in the summer, and we should maybe educate or protect more during those months. However, when we take into account the cycling rate, so the amount of cyclists in the city, this is where we observe that the risk is definitely highest in the fall and especially in winter months, probably due to low light conditions, so low visibility. And this was quite interesting for the city of Vancouver to have this type of data, to be able to target, especially educational programs, maybe also reflect on how to increase the lighting conditions, and have that type of work in mind rather than focusing on the summer month when they do observe more cyclists. So that was quite revealing to them. And this is just a graph showing the yearly reported crash count involving cyclists over the same period of time. And we can clearly see a sharp decrease starting about in 2019. I cannot explain it myself. I'm not from Vancouver, so maybe there is a reason in the network because it used to be quite stable. But anyway, so it's encouraging to see that there are less collisions involving cyclists, so higher level of protection. We finally looked at how this data, where this risk is located. So this is where the collisions alone are located involving cyclists. So we see a lot of downtown locations. Highlighted in red is just the main street facilities that has been removed, let's say, of the bicycle network lately. So we can see that the treated intersections are the ones that where most collisions do occur. So right now the city of Vancouver is looking at collision data is happening, collisions happen here, so we need to make treatments at those intersections. However, when we look at, when we take into account the exposure of cyclists, the number of, like, let's say millions of cyclists, when we report collisions per millions of cyclists on the network, we quickly see that the higher risk intersections are located just near the all age and ability bicycle network. So on the way to those facilities, and also more of them are located outside the downtown core. And just to give you an example, this is the top 3 intersections with the highest collision risk in Vancouver, based, when we take into account the exposure level. So they're all like kind of arterials with no level of protection whatsoever, and they're not downtown. So this is the next area of focus, I'd say, for the development of the bicycle network. I'm not sure I have too much time to get into the data limitations, so maybe I can stop here. But essentially, in a nutshell, we were using Smart Halo data, which Smart Halo doesn't exist anymore, but the idea was to get commuter cycling, a data set that was close to commuter cycling patterns, rather than, say, Strava, that might be more about recreational cycling, because we were looking at downtown trips, like, downtown network. Obviously, there was a big bias in terms of women being underrepresented, the elderly also being underrepresented. It was quite a short data set, and it was lacking a bit of coverage as well of the local streets. So by default, we tended to overestimate the number of cyclists on local streets, which had an impact of underestimating maybe the collision rate. But nonetheless, the 3 intersections I showed you as example of the top 3 intersections, that had the highest collision rate, are part of those intersections where we were overestimating the number of cyclists. So the actual risk is even higher than what we calculated in that case. So I'll stop here, but I'd be happy to answer some questions. The idea was, okay, maybe my last point really is to get maybe more representativity also on those local streets. So using count data, we were using a lot of permanent count stations, using permanent, that are typically installed on heavily used infrastructure. So one of the lessons learned, I think, is to be able also to deploy for the city of Vancouver maybe a set of mobile counters to quickly get, over short periods of time, an estimate of cycling on local streets or like less used streets.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, one over here.
Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting, because I didn't know this existed for cycling. So these points of calculating numbers. My question is sort of off the beat, though, as far as not, because I understand what you're saying for the roads and whatnot, and that's obviously important. The area where I work and live and play has high trail systems. Is this something that you implement in that type of setting as well? And can it be used? And it may be a different drive, as far as it may not focus on safety, as it may focus more to economic development.
Yeah, absolutely. We work a lot actually with trail managers. So it could be like even natural parks, state parks, provincial parks, to monitor when the trails are used. We've had studies also to look into how foot traffic or bike traffic in certain areas would disturb endangered species. So it was the data can be used in many different ways, when to operate your park or when to plan the maintenance, to improve signage as well. Some clients also figured out like, oh, some parts of the network are not used at all. Like there might be some reason. So then, they started thinking about that. Yeah, so definitely something we can do, both permanent, counts or temporary counts. Like there's different types of counters out there. It's fairly low tech and low maintenance, and 90% of what we sell is like battery operated as well. So it's yeah, very low maintenance, I'd say. And definitely like half of our clients are in natural areas, I would say.
Well, thank you very much. That was 3 very interesting presentations. Thank you to our speakers. We'll have a round of applause for them. And a donation on their behalf has been made to the Canadian Road Safety Youth Committee for presenting here. So thank you very much. And if you have any further questions, I'm sure any of the speakers except Felix will be happy to see you in the lunchroom and answer your questions.
Thank you so much. Bye, Paul.